Hey guys, this is Rudy for Bester Investor. Today I'm broadcasting from my office under the watchful eyes of George Washington and John Adams because I have a serious topic to discuss, which is the Occidental probability of bankruptcy. So I figured I may as well do it under the watchful gaze of the founding fathers of the United States of America. Anyway, this is an interesting discussion. It's the probability, and if we think of probability as a word, it's kind of like an English language play where you can say, what's the difference between probability and possibility? The difference is probability. You could say, is it probable? Like, for example, is it probable that Donald Trump could win the US election? And then you could say, what is the possibility of that? Or is it likely? So most people in 2016 would have said it's unlikely Hillary Clinton's probably going to win the election. But anyway, here we are. So it's English wordplay. I have quite a few slides in this deck, so I'm going to go through as quickly as I can, but at the same time try not to gloss over information that might be important to you. Firstly, just as a summary, OXY's revenue per employee is stable. Last year, 2019, they reported revenue of approximately 1.47 million per employee. The EBITDA, some of you have watched my previous videos will kind of know my thoughts on EBITDA. It's one of those nuanced accounting terms, expected to rise to about $7.9 billion in 2020, but the net income per employee is expected to drop to approximately $47.5 thousand for 2020. Of course, there's a huge difference between revenue and net income, but if we assume, just for the sake of this discussion, that the average employee is earning $50,000 per year or more, you can already see that the net income per employee runs into a negative. The 2020 projected receivables and inventories approximately $6 and $1.25 billion. So that's where we are today in terms of a quick summary. So about the probability of bankruptcy, we should not be confusing this with the actual chance of a company to file for Chapter 11, right? We're just discussing the probability. So I don't want any of my fellow long investors to go into a total panic. This is a topic we need to discuss and be aware of, and that's why I'm addressing it today. My primary source site for this information that I'm sharing with you is Macro Access. You can log into Macro Access yourself online and see some of these interesting things that they do for a variety of different equities, including other equities that you might be invested in. They define financial distress as an operational condition where a company is having difficulty to meet its current financial obligations. Now, we know in the very near term, because of the debt tender offers and because of the $1 billion of cash in the bank as at the end of Q2, the additional facility that they have of $5 billion, which is available, in other words, it's undrawn right now, the asset sales, etc. Occidental right now, as we speak, is not in financial distress, right? So that's an important first condition to meet. Macro Access derives these conditions daily from public financial statements, analysis of stock prices relating to the market, other factors, R&D expenses, social sentiment, commitments, etc. In other words, they have access to the same information that we have access to as investors. They're just compiling it for us in a neat little package that we can tap into. The current Occidental probability of bankruptcy, 47%. So this is one of those kind of escape clauses, right? It's 50-50. If it happens, then you can say, well, I said there's a 50% chance it's not going to happen. It's almost like forecasting the weather. And then how they arrive at this is part of a valuation analysis model. If the real value is higher than the market price, equity is undervalued. We all know Occidental today is undervalued. So I don't want to gloss over these things, but at the same time, I don't want to get stuck in the weeds over here. The calculation of probability relies on a number of different factors and algorithms that they use. The Altman Z-score, the Piotrowski F-score. I don't know what those things are. It doesn't matter. But at the end of the day, what they do is they include the financial statement analysis, different types of price predictions, earnings estimates, etc., analyst consensus. In other words, everything that we look at as investors anyway. They have this cute little graph here, which is the probability of bankruptcy driver correlations. Here we're looking primarily at the things that flash red. Everything else is kind of okay. So what is flashing red? Well, the long-term debt to equity ratio is flashing red. I think by now everybody's aware of the fact that OXY is carrying a huge debt load, and I think we're also aware of the fact that OXY's management is doing everything they can in order to reduce that debt load as best they possibly can, especially in the near term, covering the period 2020, 21, and maybe through to 2023 as it relates to the debt tender offers that they've been putting out there. You can ask yourself, so what are the main bankruptcy drivers? And here we can look at OXY, and we can look at a period for the previous 5 years and then compare it to 2020 projected. You know, it's early days here. What I like to look at from a personal point of view is this little area over here. So what we're looking at is total liabilities, debt, current liabilities, total asset, current assets, etc. Now you will know or should know by now that a balance sheet is basically the sum total of your assets that have to equal your liabilities and your owner's equity. So if we look at Occidental's assets, the two lines at the bottom of this red circle over here, it has total assets of almost $118 billion. And then just above it, it says liabilities. And what we can do is we can take those liabilities, and the total liability is $81 billion. You can deduct that from the total assets, and the remaining balance would be your shareholder equity. So do not confuse the balance sheet fundamentals with liquidity. Liquidity is required to service your debt and to make sure that you don't get into a situation where you can't afford to pay your bills, right? So think of it as income earned on a monthly basis, you know, for your salary for the work that you do, and the expenses that you have to pay, like your mortgage and your food and your car and everything else that you have to do. That's a liquidity issue. A bankruptcy issue is more related to the fact that you owe people $1 million and you're only earning $50,000 per year. So the chances of you repaying that $1 million is pretty poor. So you're probably going to file for bankruptcy in that typical type of scenario I just illustrated. That is not the case in terms of where OXY is right now. This is the buy, hold, and sell recommendation from Macro Axis. This is probably going to come as no surprise to you that they're saying Occidental is a strong sell. If you're underwater on a position, whether you sell the position to exit it is kind of a strategy that you can deploy. At the end of the day, I've mentioned this before, if you have a stock that's underwater, you effectively have three choices. You can either buy a little bit more to average your cost basis down, you can do nothing and just wait, or otherwise you can sell and book the loss, and then your loss becomes a realized loss. So you can do that for tax purposes, for example. So maybe at the end of the year, if you have profit on other equities and you have a loss, you can always decide to sell some of your OXY shares in order to reduce your tax liability for the gains that you realized throughout the year. The headers here: volatility, hype, current valuation, etc. In other words, all the things, the different parameters that they use to arrive at this is interesting. The other thing I scooped from Macro Axis here is just a little time horizon. Basically, they're saying if your time horizon is like 3 months or less, just stay away. Don't get into Occidental at all. And then, of course, whatever your risk tolerance is will determine whether you want to actually buy OXY or hold it, or maybe run away and head for the hills. So on that note, right now what I'm going to do is move into a little bit of better news, because by now you probably know I'm an optimist, so I like to share good news as well. The current analyst advice, this is my starting point for good news, and of course you may say, but Rudy, in the past, you as Mr. OXY has said analyst schmanalyst, meaning that you don't really trust these guys. But at the end of the day, I still pay attention to what they say. I look at their target mean price, for example, at around $15 plus. I look at the actual analyst recommendations overall, kind of averaging them out. It's difficult to decide who's a good analyst and who's a bad analyst. 21% of analysts say Occidental is a strong buy, and nearly 60% of them say you should hold it. So 60 plus 20, for me means about 80% of analysts says you can either hold OXY or you should consider it a strong buy in terms of where we are right now. And then you could say to yourself, so what are the big guys doing? And that's on the next slide. Here we have a quick summary of the top 7 largest holders of Occidental, and you can see that just the top 3 here, maybe the top 4, because they're all $1 billion plus. Dodge Cox at 2.3 billion, Vanguard is almost at 2 billion, Carl Icahn is 1.6 billion, BlackRock at $1 billion in terms of the number of shares that they hold today. So OXY, despite where it's trading at in terms of its stock, is liked by institutional investors. So in a way, probably that gives us, as small investors, a sense of confidence. Fundamentals versus its peers. This is interesting. The ugly lines are at the top, return on equity, return on assets, the profit margin, etc. The more good-looking lines are sort of towards the bottom. The operating profit margin for Occidental, approximately 42% versus its peers, booking negative operating margins. The current valuation, 59.95, so 60 billion compared to the peer average 16, etc. So you can kind of see it's a mixed bag. Most of the negative items at the top here, so the profit margin, the return on equity, return on assets, etc., are negative, and some of them are mostly shorter term. So let's look ahead. So the earnings boundaries here, this is also from Macro Axis. The current earnings per share as of 15 September 2020, which was yesterday, negative 14.45. Estimated EPS, $3.32 negative. And then you see there's quite a delta between the lowest and the highest, which is how we arrived at an average of negative $3.32. So that's kind of the look ahead in terms of where we are right now. How about the estimated earnings per share? So here we can look again to see sort of what happened in the good old days before 2020, which is over here. And then you can see a gradual improvement. My arrow probably makes it look better than it is, but anyway, there's your improvement sort of going over the next couple of years, 2021 and 2022. So the other thing we can look at here is the share price prediction. So the share price prediction, the current value, this is as of yesterday. Obviously yesterday was a nice little uptick day. We had a 5 or 6% gain after hype price. So this is kind of where it becomes a little bit too subjective for me. But what is interesting is you have a downside of approximately $7.68 and an upside, and I'm sorry it's a little bit obscured there behind my little picture of myself, but an upside of about $15.16. Considering my current position in Occidental right now as a long investor, if Occidental were to drop to $7.68, I would probably back up the truck and get some more, unless there's a change in the fundamentals of the organization, in which case I will not do what I just said. On the other hand, the upside currently reflects almost a 50% gain from the current stock price. So it's interesting to see sort of where they're heading and what they're doing in terms of share price prediction as per Macro Axis, doing the summary of the analysts. So I'm going to wrap it up with this one. Many people have said, when will OXY start paying a dividend again? So let's look quickly at that. So the bottom end scenario of the dividend income per share, 71 cents. So currently, obviously, most long investors will know OXY is paying a penny per share every quarter, which is 4 cents per year. So the bottom scenario there, Occidental stated in their Q2 2020 earnings results that their medium-term objective is to restore the dividend and reward the shareholders. Macro Axis predicts over 1 year the dividend rises to about $1.60, and then you have a top scenario here of about $2.44. So that's currently the projection in terms of dividend income per share. So I need to wrap it up by just giving you an opinion here, and my opinion is Um, I cannot predict the probability or even the possibility of Occidental filing for bankruptcy. I would certainly say it's very, very unlikely that Occidental is a candidate for bankruptcy. There are players in the energy market in the United States that are much more likely candidates for bankruptcy. So OXY for me does not fit that bill as of today. Now, of course, things may change. Share prices go up and down. Institutional investors enter and exit the positions as they wish, and that impacts the market sentiment as well and might even create a catalyst. I think the insiders are underinvested in Occidental. I think the insiders are also inclusive of an executive team that is not getting the Occidental story out into the marketplace effectively. So there are many things that are wrong, but they are sort of more micro type factors, the things that I just mentioned, like insiders can buy more shares, the executive management can get out there in the market and tell the story, etc. So these are things that they can control to a degree. And then the macro items they cannot control at all. So if we see oil tank and suddenly WTI is trading at, $10, $15, $20 a barrel, then everyone's in trouble, right? So we cannot make a prediction, but I would certainly say it is highly, highly unlikely that we will see an Occidental bankruptcy. In fact, it's more likely that we'll see a very gradual recovery, but it may take at least the medium term. So in other words, a couple of years, and maybe, to be fair, 3 to 5 years, and it will be a good news story for people who are long OXY. So you got to be brave, you got to be patient, and at the end of the day, it's going to test your reserve every single day. So on that note, I'm signing off. This is Rudy, or Mr. OXY, for Best Year Investor, saying enjoy your day, be safe, take care, and I'll be back soon with a different video. Thanks for watching, and please subscribe if you like it. Bye-bye.